Round the Fire. Number 3. The Story of the Lost Special. The confession of Herbert de Lerac, now lying under sentence of death at Marseille, has thrown a light upon the most inexplicable crimes of the century, an incident which is, I believe, absolutely unprecedented in the criminal annals of any country. Although there is a reluctance to discuss the matter in official circles, little information has been given to the press. There are still indications that the statement of this arch-criminal is corroborated by the facts that he would have at last found the solution for the most astounding business. As a matter of 8 years old, and its importance was somewhat obscured by the political crisis which was engaging the public attention at the time, it may well be to state the facts as far as we have been able to ascertain them. They are collated from the Liverpool papers of the dates, from the proceedings of the inquest of John Slater, the engine driver, and from the records of London and West Coast Railway Company, which have been courteously but at the disposal. Briefly, they are as follows. On the 3rd of June, 1890, a gentleman who gave his name as Monsieur Louis Catterall desired to interview with Mr. James Bland, the superintendent of the Central London and West Coast Station of Liverpool. He was a small man, middle-aged and dark, with a stoop which so marked that suggested some deformity of the spine. He was accompanied by a friend, a man of imposing physique whose deferential manner and constant attention suggested that he was in the position was one of dependence. This friend or companion, whose name did not transpire, was certainly a foreigner, probably from a swarthy complexion, either Spaniard or South American. One peculiarity was observed in him. He carried in his left hand a small black leather dispatch box, and on it was noticed by the sharp-eyed clerk of the central office that this box was fastened to his wrists by a strap. No importance was attached to the fact at this time, but subsequent events endowed it with some significance. Monsieur Carreteau was shown up to Mr. Bland's office, while his companion remained outside. Monsieur Carreteau's business was quickly dispatched. He had arrived that afternoon from Central America. Affairs of the utmost importance demanded that he should be in Paris without the loss of any unnecessary hour. He had missed the London express. A special must be provided. Money was of no importance. Time was everything. And the company would speed him on his way. They might make their own terms. Mr. Bland struck the electric bell and summoned Mr. Potterhood, the traffic manager, and had the matter arranged in 5 minutes. The train would start in 3/4 of an hour, and would take the time to ensure that the line would be clear. The powerful engine, called Rochdale, number 247 on the company's register, was attached to 2 carriages, with a man's guard van behind. The first carriage was solely for the purpose of decreasing the inconvenience arising from the oscillation. The second was divided, as usual, into 4 compartments. The first class smoking, the second class, and the second class smoking. The first compartment, which was the nearest to the engine, was the one allotted to the travelers. The other 3 remained empty. The guard of the special train was James McPherson, who had been some years in the service of the company. The stoker, William Smith, was a new hand. Monsieur Carreteau, upon leaving the superintendent's office, rejoined his companion, and both of them manifested extreme impatience to be off. Having paid the money asked, which amounted to £5, 5 shillings, and the usual special rate of 5 shillings a mile, they demanded to be shown to the carriage, and at once took their seats in it, although they were assured that the better part of an hour would elapse before the line could be cleared. In the meantime, a singular coincidence had occurred at the office which Monsieur Carreteau had just quitted. The request for a special is not a very uncommon circumstance in a rich commercial center, but that 2 should be required upon the same afternoon was most unusual. It so happened, however, that Mr. Bland had hardly dismissed the first traveler before the second entered to request similar. This was Mr. Harold Small, a gentlemanly man of military appearance, who alleged that the sudden illness of his wife in London made it absolutely imperative they should not lose an instant on arriving at the journey. His distress and anxiety were so evident that Mr. Bland did all that was possible to meet his wishes. A second special was out of the question, as the ordinary local service was already somewhat deranged from the first. There was an alternative, however. Mr. Moore could share the expense of Monsieur Carot's train and should travel in the other empty-class compartments, if Monsieur Carot objected to having him in the one he occupied. It was difficult to see any objection in the arrangement, and yet Monsieur Carot, upon the suggestion of being made to him by poor Mr. Potter Hood, absolutely refused to consider it for an instant. The train was his, he said, and he would insist upon an exclusive use of it. The argument failed to overcome his ungracious objections, and finally the plan had to be abandoned. Mr. Horace Moore left the station in great distress, after learning that his only course was to take an ordinary slow train which leaves Liverpool at 6 o'clock. At 4:31 exactly by the station clock, the special train containing the crippled Monsieur Carotol and his gigantic companion steamed out of the Liverpool station. The line was at that time clear, and should have been no stoppage before Manchester. The trains of the London and West Coast Railway run over the lines of another company as far as this town, which should have been reached by the special before 6 o'clock. At 6:15, considerable surprise and some consternation was caused amongst the officials of Liverpool by the receipt of a telegram from Manchester to say that it had not yet arrived. An enquiry directed to St. Helens, which is a third of the way between the two cities, solicited the following reply. To James Bland, Superintendent, Central L&WC, Liverpool. Special passed here at 4:52, well up on time. Dowser, St. Helens. The telegram was received at 6:40. At 6:50, a second message was received from Manchester. No sign of special, as advised by you. And then 10 minutes later, a third, more bewildering. Presumed some mistake as to proceed running of special. Local train from St. Helens arrived at the time just as it arrived, and is seeing nothing of it. Kindly wire advices. Manchester. The matter was assuming the most amazing aspect, although in some respects the last telegram was a relief to the authorities of Liverpool. If an accident had occurred to the special, it seemed hardly possible that the local train would pass down the same line without observing it. And yet, what was the alternative? Where could the train be? Had it possibly been sidetracked for some reason in order to allow a slower train to go past? Such an explanation was possible if some repair had to be effected. A telegram was dispatched to each of the stations between St. Helens and Manchester, and the superintendent and traffic manager waited in the utmost suspense at the instrument for the series of replies which would enable them to say for certain what had become of the missing train. The answers came back in the order of the questions, which was the order of the stations beginning at St. Helens. Special passed here at 5 o'clock, Collins Green. Special passed at 5:06, Earlstown. Special passed here 5:10, Newton. Special passed here 5:20, Kenyon Junction. No special train has passed here, Barton Moss. The two officials stared at each other in amazement. This is unique in my 30 years of experience, said Mr. Brett. Absolutely unprecedented. Inexplicable, sir. The special has gone wrong between Kenyon Junction and Barton Moss. And yet there's no siding, as far as my memory serves me, between the two stations. The special must have run off the rails. But how could the 450 Parliamentary pass over the same line without observing it? There's no alternative, Mr. Hood. It must be so. Possibly the local train may have observed something which may throw some light on the matter. We will wire Manchester for more information and to Kenyon Junction with instructions that the line be examined instantly as far as Barton Moss. The answer from Manchester came within a few minutes. No news of missing special. Driver and guard of slow train positive that no accident between Kenyon Junction and Barton Moss. Line quite clear, and no sign of anything unusual. Man. The guard and driver will have to go, said Mr. Bland grimly. There's been a wreck and they've missed it. The special has obviously run off their metals without disturbing the line. How could it have done any passes my comprehension, but so it must be, and we shall have a wire from Kate and Barton Moss presently to say that they have found her at the bottom of an embankment. But Mr. Bland's prophecy was not destined to be fulfilled. A half hour passed, and then there arrived a following message from station master at Kenyon Junction. There are no traces of missing special. It is quite certain that she had passed here, and that she did not arrive at Barton Moss. We have a dispatched engine on from Goods train, and I have ridden myself down the line. But all is clear, and there is no sign of any accident. Mr. Bland tore his hair in his perplexity. This is lunacy, Hood, he cried. Does the train vanish in thin air in London in broad daylight? The thing is preposterous. An engine, a tender, 2 carriages, a van, 5 human beings, and all lost in a straight line of railway. Unless we get something positive within the next hour, I'll take Inspector Collins and go down myself. And then, at last, something positive did occur. It took shape of another telegram from Kenyon Junction. Regret to report that the dead body of John Slater, driver of the train special, has been found among the gorse bushes at points 2 1/4 miles from the junction. Had fallen from his engine, pitched down the embankment, and rolled among the bushes. Injuries to his head from the fall appear to be the cause of death. Ground has been carefully examined. There is no trace of a missing train. The country was, as has already been stated, in the throes of a political crisis, and the attention of the public was further distracted by the important and sensational developments in Paris, where a huge scandal threatened to destroy the government and wreck the reputations of many a leading man in France. The papers were full of these events, and the singular disappearance of the special train attracted less attention than would have been the case in more peaceful times. The grotesque nature of the event helped to detract from its importance, for the papers were disinclined to believe the facts as reported to them. More than one of the London journals treated the matter as an ingenious hoax, until the coroner's inquest upon the unfortunate driver, an inquest which elicited nothing of importance, convinced them of the tragedy of the incident. Mr. Bland, accompanied by Inspector Collins, the senior detective officer of the service of the company, went down to Kenyon Junction the same evening, and their research lasted throughout the following day, but was attended with purely negative results. Not only was no trace of the missing train, but no conjecture could be put forward which could possibly explain the facts. At the same time, Inspector Collins' official report, which lies before me as I write this, serves to show that the possibilities were none more numerous than might have been expected. On the stretch of railway between these 2 points, he said, the country is dotted with ironworks and collieries. Of these, some were being worked and some have been abandoned. There are no fewer than 12 of which small gauge lines which run trolley cars down to the main line. These can, of course, be disregarded. Besides these, however, there are 7 which have or had proper lines running down, connecting to the points of the main line, so to convey their produce to the mouth of the mine, to the great centers of distribution. In every case, these lines are only a few miles in length. Out of the 7, 4 belong to collieries which are out of work, or at least to shafts that no longer used. These are Red Gauntlet, Hero, Slough of Despond, and the Heartsease mines. the latter having 10 years ago been one of the principal mines in Lancashire. These four sidelines may be eliminated from inquiry, for to prevent possible accidents, the rails nearest the main line have been taken up, and they are no longer in any connection. There remain three other side lines leading to the Carnstock Iron Works, to the Big Ben Colliery, and to the Preservation Colliery. Of these, the Big Ben line is not more than a quarter of a mile long and ends in a dead wall of coal, waiting removal from the mouth of the mine. Nothing can be seen or heard of any of the special. The Carnstock Ironworks line was blocked all day upon the 3rd of June by 16 truckloads of hematite. In a single line, nothing could have passed. As to the Perseverance line, it is a double line, which does considerable traffic, for the output of the mine is very large. On the 3rd of June, the traffic proceeded as usual. Hundreds of men, including a gang of railway plate workers, were working along the 2 miles and a quarter which constitute the total length of the line, and it is inconceivable that an unexpected train could have come down there without attracting universal attention. It may be remarked in conclusion that this branch line is near to St. Helens and to the point at which the engine driver was discovered, so that we have every reason to believe that the train was past the point before misfortune overtook her. As to John Slater, there is no clue to the gathered from his appearance or injuries. We can only say that, as far as we can see, he met his end by falling off his engine, though why he fell or what became of the engine after his fall is a question upon which I do not feel qualified to offer an opinion. In conclusion, the inspector offered his resignation to the board, being much nettled by his accusations of incompetence in the London papers. A month elapsed, during which both the police and the company prosecuted their inquiries without the slightest success. A reward was offered and a pardon promised in case of crime, but they were both unclaimed. Every day the public opened their papers with the convictions that so grotesque a mystery would at least have been solved. But week after week passed by, and a solution remained as far off as ever. In broad daylight, upon a June afternoon in the most thickly inhabited portion of England, a train with its occupants had disappeared as completely as if some master of simple chemistry had volatilized it into gas. Indeed, among the various conjectures were put forward in the public press, there were some which seriously asserted the supernatural, or at least preternatural, agencies had been at work, and the deformed Monsieur Cartol was probably the person who was better known under a less polite name. Others fixed upon his swarthy companion as being the author of the mischief, but what it was exactly which he had done could never be clearly formulated in words. Amongst many other suggestions put forward by various papers or private individuals, there were one or two which were feasible enough to attract the attention of the public. One which appeared in the Times, over the signature of an amateur reasoner of some celebrity at that date, attempted to deal with the matter with a critical and semi-scientific manner. An extract must suffice, although the curious will see the whole letter on the issue of the 3rd of July. It is one of elementary principles among reasoning, he remarked, that when the impossible has been eliminated, the residuum, however improbable, must contain the truth. It is certain that the train left Caton Station. It is certain that it did not reach Barton Moss. It is in the highest degree unlikely, but still possible, that it may have been taken off the 7 available sidelines. It is obviously impossible for a train to run where there are no rails, and therefore we may deduce the improbabilities of 3 open lines, namely the Carnstock Ironworks, the Big Ben, and the Perseverance. There is a secret society of colliers, an English chimera, which is capable of destroying both train and passengers. It is improbable, but it is not impossible. I confess that I am unable to suggest other solution. I should certainly advise the company to direct all their energies towards the observation of those 2 lines, and to the workmen at the end of them. A careful supervision of the pawnbroker's shops district might possibly bring some suggestive facts to mind. The suggestion coming from a recognized authority upon such matters created considerable interest, and a fierce opposition from those who considered such a statement to be preposterous and liable upon an honest and deserving set of men. The only answer to the criticism was a challenge to the objectors to lay any more feasible explanation before the public. In reply to this, the two others were forthcoming. The times, July 7th and the 9th. The first suggested that the train might have run off the Meadows and be lying submerged in the Lancashire or Staffordshire Canal, which runs parallel to the railway for some 100 yards. This suggestion was thrown out of court by the published depth of the canal, which is entirely insufficient to conceal a large object. The second correspondent wrote, calling attention to the bag, which appeared to be the sole luggage of the travelers had brought with them, and suggested that some novel explosive or immense and pulverizing power might have been concealed in it. The obvious absurdity, however, of supposing that the whole train might be blown to dust while the metals remained uninjured, reduced any such explanation to farce. The investigation had drifted into the hopeless position when a new and most unexpected incident occurred, which raised the hopes never destined to be fulfilled. This was nothing less than the receipts by Mrs. McPherson of a letter from her husband, James McPherson, who had been the guard of the missing train. The letter, which was dated July 5th, 1890, was dispatched from New York and came to hand upon July 14th. Some doubts were expressed as to its genuine character, but Mrs. McPherson was positive as to the writing, and the fact that it contained a remittance of $100 and $5 notes was enough to itself discount the idea of a hoax. No address was given in the letter, which ran in this way. My dear wife, I've been thinking of you a great deal, and I find it very hard to give you up. The same with Lizzie. I try to fight against it, but it will always come back to me. I send you some money with which to exchange into £20 English notes. This should be enough to bring both Lizzie and yourself across the Atlantic, and you will find the Hamburg boats which stop at Southampton very good boats, and cheaper than Liverpool. If you could come here and stop at the Johnson House, I would try to send you word how to meet. But things are very difficult for me at present, and I am not very happy, finding it hard to give you both up. So, no more at present. Your loving husband, James McPherson. For a time, this was confidently anticipated that this letter would lead to the clearing up of the whole matter. And the more so, it was ascertained that the passenger who bore close resemblance to the missing guard had traveled from Southampton under the name of Summers in the Hamburg, a New York liner Vistula, which started on the 7th of June. Mrs. McPherson and her sister Lizzie Dalton went across to New York as instructed and stayed for 3 weeks at the Johnson House without hearing anything from the missing man. It is possible that some injurious comments in the press may have warned him that the police were using them as bait. However this may be, it is certain that he neither wrote nor came, and the women were eventually compelled to return to Liverpool. And so the matter stood, and has continued to stand up to the present year of 1898. Incredible as it may seem, nothing has transpired during these 8 years which has shed at least light on the extraordinary disappearance of a special train which contained Monsieur Caratal and his companion. Careful inquiries to the antecedents of the two travelers have only established the fact that Monsieur Caratal was well known as a financier and political agent of Central America, and that during his voyage to Europe he had betrayed extraordinary anxiety to reach Paris. His companion, whose name was entered upon the passenger list as Eduardo Gomez, was a man whose record was a violent one, and whose reputation was that of a bravo and a bully. There was evidence to show, however, that he was honestly devoted to the interests of Monsieur Caratal, and that the latter, being of a man of puny physique, employed the other as a guard and protector. It may be added that no information came from Paris as to the objects of Monsieur Caratal's hurried journey may have been. This compromises all the facts of the case, the publication of Marseille papers, and the recent confession of Herbert de Lenac, who, under sentence of death for the murder of a merchant named Bonnevat. This statement may be literally translated as follows. It's not out of mere pride or boasting that I give this information, for if that were my object, I could tell you a dozen actions of mine which are quite as splendid. But I do in order to certain gentlemen in Paris may understand that I, who am able to be here, tell about the fate of Monsieur Caratal, can also tell in whose interests and at whose request the deed was done, unless the reprieve I am awaiting comes to me very quickly. Take warning, monsieurs, before it is too late. You know Herbert de Lernac, and you are aware that his deeds are ready as his words. Hasten in, or you are lost. At present I shall mention no names. If you only heard the names, what would you not think? But I shall merely tell you how cleverly I did it. I was true to my employers then, and no doubt they will be true to me now. I hope so, and until I am convinced that they have betrayed me, those names, which would convulse Europe, shall not be divulged. But on that day, well, I say no more. In a word, then, there was a famous trial in Paris in the year of 1890, in connection with a monstrous scandal in politics and finance. How monstrous that scandal was can never be known save by such confidential agents as myself. The honor and careers of many of the chief men in France were at stake. You have seen a group of ninepins standing, all so rigid and prim and unbending. Then here comes a ball from far away, and pop, 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 there are your 9 pins on the floor. Well, imagine some of the greatest men in France as these 9 pins. And then this Monsieur Caratal was a ball which could be coming from far away. If he arrived, then it was pop, pop, pop for all of them. It was determined that he should not arrive. I do not accuse them all of being conscious of what happened. There were, as I have said, great financial and, well, political interests at stake, and a significance was formed to manage the business. Some subscribed to the syndicates who hardly understood what it was objects, but others understood very well, and they can all reply upon it that I have not forgotten their names. They had ample warning that Monsieur Caratal was coming long before he left South America, and they knew that the evidence which he held would certainly mean ruin to them all. The syndicates had a command of an unlimited amount of money. Absolutely unlimited, you understand. They looked round for an agent who was capable of wielding this gigantic power. The man chosen would be inventive, resolute, adaptive. A man in a million. And they chose Herbert de Lernac, and I admit that they were right. My duties were to choose my subordinates and use freely the power which money gives, and to make certain that Monsieur Caratal should never arrive in Paris. The characteristic energy I set about my commission within an hour of receiving my instructions, and the steps which I took were the very best for the purpose which I could possibly be devised. A man whom I could trust was dispatched instantly to South America to travel home with Monsieur Caratal. He had arrived in time, and the ship would never have reached Liverpool, but alas, it had already started before my agent could reach it. I fitted out a small armed brig to accept it, but again I was unfortunate. Like all great organizers, I was, however, prepared for failure, and I had a series of alternatives prepared, one or the other of which must succeed. You must not undertake the difficulties of my understanding, or imagine that a mere commonplace assassin would beat the best. We must destroy not only Monsieur Caratal, but Monsieur Caratal's documents, and Monsieur Caratal's companions too, if we had reason to believe that they had communicated his secrets with them. And you must remember that they were on the alert and keenly suspicious of any such attempt. It was a task which was in every way worthy of me, and I am always most masterful, whereupon would be appalled. I was all ready for Monsieur Caratal's reception in Liverpool, and I was more eager because I had reason to believe that he had made arrangements by which he would have a considerable guard from the moment that he arrived in London. Anything which was to be done must be done between the moment of his setting foot in Liverpool Quay and that of his arrival in London and West Coast Terminus in London. We prepared 6 plans, each more elaborate than the last. Which plan would be used would depend upon my own motives. Do what we would, we were ready for him. If he stayed in Liverpool, we were ready. If he took an ordinary train, an express, or a special, all was ready. Everything had been foreseen and provided for. You may imagine that I could not do all this by myself. What could I know about the English railway lines? But money can provide leading agents all over the world, and I had soon one of the best and acutest brands in England to assist me. I will mention no names, but it would be unjust to claim all the credit for myself. My English ally was worthy of such an alliance. He knew the London and West Coast line thoroughly, and he had the command of a band of workers who were trustworthy and intelligent. The idea was his, and my own judgment was only required in the details. We brought over several officials. Amongst them the most important was James Macpherson, whom we had ascertained to be the guard most likely to be employed upon the special train. Smith, the stoker, was also in our employ. John Slater, the engine driver, had been approached, but he had been found too obstinate and dangerous, so we desisted. We had no certainty that Monsieur Caratal would take a special, but we thought it very probable, for it was the utmost importance to him that he should reach Paris without delay. It was for this contingency, therefore, that we made special preparations which were complete down to the last long detail before the steamer had sighted the shores of England. You will be amused to learn that there was one of my agents on the pilot boat which brought the steamer into its moorings. The moment that Caratal arrived in Liverpool, we knew that he suspected danger and was on his guard. He had brought with him an escort, a dangerous fellow named Gomez, a man who carried weapons and was prepared to use them. This fellow carried Caratal's confidential papers for him and was ready to protect either them or his master. The probability was that Caratal had taken him into his counsels, and that to remove Caratal without removing Gomez would be a mere waste of energy. It was necessary that they should be involved in a common fate, and our plans to that end were much facilitated by request for the special train. On the special train, you understand that 2 of the 3 servants of the company were really an our employee, at a price which would make them independent for a lifetime. I do not go so far as to say that the English are more honest or any other nation, but I have found them more expensive to buy. I have already spoken of my English agent, who is a man with a considerable future before him, unless some complaint of the throat carries him off before his time. I had charge of all arrangements at Liverpool, whilst I was stationed at Kenyon, where I waited a cipher signal to act. When the special was arranged for, my agent instantly telegraphed me and warned me how soon I should have everything ready. He himself, under the name of Horsmore, applied immediately for a special also, and in hope that he would be sent down with Monsieur Caratal, which might be, under a certain circumstance, have been helpful to us. If, for example, a great coup had failed, it would be the outcome for the duty of my agent to have shot them both and destroyed the papers. Caratal was on his guard, however, and refused to admit any other traveler. My agent then left the station, returned by another entrance, and entered the guard's van on the side farthest from the platform, and traveled down with Macpherson, the guard. In the meantime, you will be interested to know that my own movements were. Everything had been prepared for days before, and the only finishing touches were needed. The sideline which we had chosen was once joined with the main line, but it had been disconnected. We only had to replace a few rails to connect it once more. These rails had been laid down as far as could be done without danger of attracting attention, and now it was merely a case of completing a junction of the line and arranging the points as they had been for Doyle. The sleepers had never been removed, and the rails, fish plates, and rivets were all ready for and had been taken from the siding of the abandoned portion of the rail. With my small but competent band of workers, we had everything long ready before the special arrived. When it arrived, it ran off on the special line so easily that the jolting of the points appeared to have been entirely unnoticed by the two travelers. Our plan had been that Smith the stoker should chloroform John Slate to the driver, and so that he would vanish with the others. In this respect, in his only respect, our plans miscarried. Except the criminal folly of Macpherson writing home to his wife. Our stoker did his business so clumsily that Slater in his struggles fell off the engine, and through fortune was with us so far as he broke his neck in the fall, still he remained as a blot on that which would otherwise have been one of those complete masterpieces, which are only to be contemplated in silent admiration. The criminal expert will find in John Slater the one flaw in our admirable combinations. A man who has been as many triumphs as I can afford to be frank, and I therefore lay my finger upon John Slater, and I proclaim him to be the flaw. But now I've got our special train on our little 2-line kilometer, and rather more than 1 mile in length, which leads, or rather used to lead, to the abandoned Hertzens mine, once one of the largest coal mines in England. You will ask how it is that no one saw the train upon this unused line. I will answer that it along the entire length runs through a deep cutting, and that unless someone had been on the edge of that cutting, he would not have been seen. There was someone on the edge of that cutting. I was there, and now I will tell you what I saw. My assistant had remained in the points in order that he might superintend the switching off of the train. He had 4 armed men with him, so that if the train ran off the line, we thought it probable, because the points were very rusty, he might have resources to fall back upon. Having once seen it land safely on the sideline, he handed over me the responsibility. I was waiting at the point over which looks the mouth of the mine, and I was also armed, as were my 2 companions. Come what might, you see, I was always ready. The moment the train was fairly on the sideline, Smith, the stoker, slowed down the engine, and then, having turned it on to the full speed again, he and Macpherson, with my English lieutenant, sprang off before it was too late, and it may be that the slowing down was the first attention of the travelers. The train was running at full speed again before their heads appeared at the open window. It makes me smile to think how bewildered they must have been. Picture to yourself your own feelings, if, looking out of your luxurious carriage, you suddenly perceive that the lines upon which you ran were rusted and corroded, red and yellow with disuse and decay. What a catch must have been in their breath when the second it flashed before them that it was not Manchester, but death which was waiting them at the end of this sinister line. But the train was running at a frantic speed, rolling and rocking over the rotten line, while the wheels made a frightful screaming sound upon the rusted surface. I was close to them and could see their faces. Caratha was praying, I think. There was something like a rosary dangling out of his hand. The other roared like a bull who smells the blood of the slaughterhouse. He saw us standing on the bank, and he beckoned to us like a madman. Then he tore at his wrist and threw the dispatch box out the window at our direction. Of course, the meaning was obvious. Here was the evidence. They would promise to be silent if their lives were spared. It would have been very agreeable if we had done so, but business is business. Besides, the train was now much beyond our control as theirs. He ceased howling when the train rattled back around the curve, and they saw the black mouth of the mine yawning before them. We had removed the boards which had covered it, and we had cleared the square entrance. The rails had formerly run very close to the shaft for the convenience of loading the coal, and we had only to add 2 or 3 links of rail in order to lead to the very brink of the shaft. In fact, as though the links would not quite fit, our line projected about 3 feet over the edge. We saw the 2 heads at the window, Garrett down below, Gomez above, and they both had been struck silent by what they saw. And yet they could not withdraw their heads. They seemed to be paralyzed. I had wondered how the train running at the great speed would take the pit into which I had guided it, and I was much interested in finding out. One of my colleagues thought that it would actually jump it, and indeed, it was not very far from doing so. Fortunately, however, it fell short, and the buffers of the engine struck the other lip of the shaft with a tremendous crash. The funnel flew off into the air. The tender carriages and Van Ross smashed into one jumble which, with the remains of the engine, choked for a moment or so the mouth of the pit. Then something gave way in the middle, and something gave way, and the whole mass of green iron, smoking coals and brass fittings, wheels, woodwork, and cushions all crumbled together and crashed down into the mine. We heard the rattle, 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 and as if the breeze struck against the walls, and then quite a long time afterwards there came a deep roar as the remains of the train struck the bottom. The boiler may have burst, and a sharp crash came after the roar, and then a dense cloud of steam and smoke swirled up from the black depths, falling in the spray as thick as the rain all around us. And then the vapor shrouded off into thin wisps which floated away in the summer sunshine, and all was quiet again in the heart-seen mine. And now, having carried out our plans so successfully, it only remained to leave no trace behind us. Our little band of workers at the other end of the rail had already ripped up the rails and disconnected the sideline, replacing everything as it had been before. We were equally busy at the mine. The funnel and other fragments were thrown in, the shaft was planked over as it used to be, and the lines which had led to it were torn up and taken away. And then, without flurry, without delay, we made our way out of the country, most of us to Paris, my English colleague to Manchester, and Macpherson to Southampton, whence he immigrated to America. Let the English papers of that state tell you how thoroughly we had done our job, and how completely we had thrown the cleverest of the detectives off of our trail. You will remember that Gomez threw his bag of papers out the window, and I need not say that I secured the bag and brought it to my employers. It may interest my employers now, however, to learn that out of the bag I took 1 or 2 of these papers as a souvenir of the occasion. I have no wish to publish these papers, but still it is every man for himself in this world, and what else can I do if my friends will not come to my aid when I want them, eh? Monsieurs, you may believe that Herbert de Lerac is quite as formidable as he is against you, as when he is with you, and that he is not the man to go up in the guillotine until he has seen that every one of you is en route for New Caledonia. For your own sake, if not for mine, make haste, Monsieur de General Baron. You can fill these blanks for yourself as you read this. I promise you that in the next edition there will be no blanks to fill. P.S. As I look over my statement, there is only one omission which I can see. It concerns the unfortunate man in Macpherson who was foolish enough to write to his wife and to make an appointment with her to New York. It can be imagined that When interests like ours are at stake, we could not leave them to the chance of whether a man in that class of life would not give away his secrets to a woman. Having once broken his oath by writing to his wife, we could not trust him anymore, and we took steps, therefore, to ensure that he should not see his wife. I have sometimes thought that it would be a kindness to write her and assure her that there is no impediments to her marrying again.